For decades, the idea of swimming in Baltimore's inner harbor was unthinkable. Polluted, filled with trash, sewer runoff, making it unsafe for human contact. But on a sunny day in June, something remarkable happened. Dozens of Baltimoreans took the plunge into the harbor's waters, making a dramatic turnaround in the city's aquatic history.
It feels great to be able to jump into Baltimore Harbor. I mean, the water's wonderful, but the accomplishment's even better.
So how did we get here? What transformed this once toxic waterway into a place where people willingly, even joyfully, submerge themselves?
It's way more swimmable than the average person thinks, that's for sure.
Today we're going off the radar and taking a dive into the story of Baltimore's harbor cleanup. We'll meet the visionaries who made this dream a reality.
So having that big, bold vision out there really forced us all to think differently about the problem and try some unique and novel approaches.
We'll also hear from a scientist about what exactly made the harbor unsafe to swim in before.
These are bacteria that, when they're present, most likely say that there's poop in the water somewhere nearby. There's some leakage.
And the social and economic importance of making the harbor a safe place for recreation now.
The swimmable, fishable harbor is really more meaningful to Baltimore residents who live in underserved areas where they don't have the option for recreation. Like they can't fly to Aruba. If they had clean water right there, just imagine how great that would make it.
I'm meteorologist Emily Gracie, and you're listening to Off the Radar, a production of the National Weather Desk. On the show, we dig deep into topics about weather, climate, the ocean, space, and much, much more. Our goal is to help you better understand the weather and to love it as much as we do.
With Audible, there's more to imagine when you listen. Whether you listen to stories, motivation, expert advice, any genre you love, you can be inspired to imagine new worlds, new possibilities, new ways of thinking. And Audible makes it easy to be inspired and entertained as a part of your everyday routine without needing to set aside extra time. As an Audible member, you choose one title a month to keep from their ever-growing catalog. Be inspired to explore your inner creativity with Viola Davis's memoir, Finding Me. Find what piques your imagination with Audible. New members can try Audible free for 30 days. Visit audible.com/imagine or text Imagine to 500-500. That's audible.com/imagine or text Imagine to 500-500.
Hi, Ryan.
Hey, Emily, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Excited to be on Off the Radar?
I'm thrilled. I think this is actually my second appearance.
It is. But this time you get to be part of the intro, which is very exciting because you get to help me talk about what the show is going to be about, too. And today is all about Baltimore, which is why I asked you to take part in this because, ta-da! Where are you from, Ryan?
Baltimore, born and raised.
All right. Awesome. Now, for those of you who are new listeners, I often talk about Off the Radar is a production of the National Weather Desk, but I don't explain what the National Weather Desk is. So I kind of want to do that right now, too, because that's where you come in as well. So the National Weather Desk, we have the podcast, we have digital, and we also have a television show, a national television show that runs every morning, every weekday morning. And Ryan is the producer of that show. So that's Ryan's part with the National Weather Desk. How's it going over there? You're up in Arlington.
Right.
I'm in Charleston, but you guys do a good job of promoting the podcast and the show. And so now I'm going to promote the show and the podcast. So tell me what's going on with the National Weather Desk.
Not much. I mean, we were busy with Debbie, obviously, recently. As you know, we like to promote our meteorologists all over the country. So we're still getting a lot of stuff from them and hoping to make weather a little bit more fun and understandable for the average viewer. But it's going pretty well.
So you've been doing this for what, 2 years now?
Yeah, actually, August 1st was my 2-year anniversary.
Oh, happy anniversary.
Yeah, thanks.
Have you learned a lot about weather yourself since doing the show?
Oh, I'm still learning. I got to work on some of it, though, like a cumulonimbus cloud. I'm still struggling.
What did you say? Cumulonimbus?
Something, yeah, right? What is it? You tell me. I don't know exactly.
Cumulonimbus.
There we go. All right.
It's a thunderstorm cloud.
Okay, you're right. So I've learned a lot of that. And I've also learned that other people use that regularly. Like I would be like, wow, that cloud looks like a heart. And other people, I guess meteorologists are like, no, that's actually a cumulonimbus cloud, which has been cut.
Yep.
But yeah, I learn stuff literally every week. I'm learning something new.
Okay, so let's talk about Baltimore. Ryan Berlin, our resident Baltimorean. today's show is all about the Baltimore Harbor and how they cleaned it up and people are swimming in it now. And so I want to get your take on this because I lived in Baltimore for a while and my initial gut reaction was like, there's no way I would swim in the harbor. But, after doing interviews on this and talking to several experts, I don't know, I'm kind of going in different directions now. So I'm curious, you as somebody who grew up in the area, like what was the inner harbor like when you were younger?
I mean, you definitely didn't swim or even consider swimming in the Baltimore Harbor. The city, I mean, when I was, Baltimore's had its ups and downs and all that. But in terms of like the downtown area, I think that's always kind of like been nice and the harbor's always been a big attraction. But the idea of swimming in it to me it's kind of a shocker, right? I mean, I live now along the Chesapeake Bay, and even that for me is a little bit like, oh gosh, I always think like this is where all like people's sewer water from Baltimore is in here. I remember there was this they had this whole big thing. I know a lot of people probably know about like the robots that go around and pick up the trash, but they had these other things that I remember they put in that would they looked like drains that they put in and the garbage would just kind of float to them and then it would like suck up the garbage. And I remember seeing that, and around those, I mean, it would just be tons and tons of garbage.
Like it's supposed to make you feel better, but it doesn't. It actually makes you aware of all the stuff that's in the water.
Yeah. And you always think you're like, okay, it's getting the garbage out, but you have to imagine that people were the ones putting the garbage in. And it's like, are you changing the behavior or are you just going to be like, all right, now we'll just kind of like, how do you find the happy medium? But it still seems very odd to me to swim in it. I mean, what does it mean it's healthy enough to swim in? Like, okay, you can go in it now and not die. Is that sort of the ideal?
Their thought process is that their goal is to make it similar to like Sandy Point State Park. So if you went there growing up, this is swimming in the harbor now is similar. They're saying the levels are similar to what it would be there.
To be fair, I don't think I went there a lot as a kid. We didn't do a lot of like bay stuff. Like, I mean, we went to like Ocean City, but that was more like the ocean. I remember they had like Bayside though, like Bayside rooms and Oceanside rooms. I think that was...
Isn't like Secrets Bayside?
Well, look, I think if you're in Secrets, you're swimming wherever...
Yeah, you're going to get something else there.
Right, exactly. I mean, if you're going to Secrets, you're probably swimming in the bay, no problem. I live in Chesapeake Beach now, and they have like these little like kind of beaches where the water... I mean, you can go out like 20, 30 feet and the water's only up to like your knees. And I take my kids there, but it's like, it's not like relaxing like ocean swimming. I don't know if I would swim I guess I would swim in the harbor to be like, oh, I'm in the harbor, but I wouldn't like get up in the morning and be like, I want to go enjoy the day and get some water and sun. I'm going to go into the Baltimorean harbor and swim.
Yeah. You might like cannonball in and get out and shower immediately.
Right. And I guess that's the other reason, like why, like Baltimore, I feel like you have the ability to go to a lot of places pretty close by. So I wonder, like, what's the draw to go swim in the harbor? I mean, I guess if you have a boat or something, you would like want to jump off or whatever. That seems kind of cool.
Yeah. And then also it's like, it's a standard. So, even if people aren't necessarily swimming in it, it's saying like it's clean. And then also it's not just swimmable, it's fishable.
Yeah, that seems cool to me. I mean, I ate crabs. Like the idea that like crabs in the bay is getting cleaner is like, that's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, so today I'm talking to a few different people. The first is going to be Adam Lindquist. He works for a Waterfront Partnership. And so he kind of spearheaded this whole thing. And they came up with this idea, I think it was 12 years ago. The goal was a 10-year, let's get the bay swimmable and fishable by a certain year, 10 years down the road. COVID happened. There was a little delay, but 2024 is when this happened. And they had this big swim event a couple months ago. And then I'm also talking to Dr. Eric Schott from the University of Maryland. He's with the Center of Environmental Science. And he's talking about kind of what was in the bay, what's in the bay now, what's in the harbor, how they cleaned it up, the different processes. There's a lot of mention of poop in that interview. I will warn you on that one.
People always joked about bodies being in the harbor. I wonder if that was ever.
I know.
That's a little too dark, but.
That is dark. But no, you're not wrong. Any thoughts on podcasts that you want to hear about coming up, Ryan?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, it's a niche, right? Weather.
Oh, we're weather, science, climate, oceans.
Apparently, there could be water on Mars. That might be interesting to get into.
You know what? I'm overdue for a space episode.
Yeah, there's something on Monday about water on Mars.
Very cool. Well, yeah, we have some episodes coming up about, I'm going to do some Mythbusters with ocean and atmosphere, kind of a back to school type of thing. I learned a lot of things from them, like one of them being, should you pee on a jellyfish sting? Like, what's your initial reaction?
I mean, I've heard that is a thing. I mean, if it's your own urine, right, it depends where you get stung, I guess, because it's limited in options there. So I don't know.
Depends on your gender too.
Right. Like if you have oh my gosh, I was stung on my nose, that might be a tough, that could really get into some areas of difficulty.
Anyway, they're going to break down the myth of that because that's not true. You should not. So non-issue, don't worry about your nose.
So they say that you should not? That
you should not, yeah.
Oh, interesting.
All right. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on today. This is awesome. Good to hear from you and to hear about everything going on with the National Weather Desk. We're going to start off with hearing from Adam Lindquist from Waterfront Partnership. Adam Lindquist, Baltimore Waterfront Partnership. Thrilled to talk to you about this mission to clean up the Baltimore Harbor. So can you tell me about the history of this project? Take me back to the beginning of why and when and who decided that the Baltimore Harbor should become swimmable.
So the Waterfront Partnership of Baltimore is really the entity, the nonprofit that's responsible for maintaining and improving the inner harbor and the Baltimore waterfront. So making sure that it's kind of the world-class destination that people expect to see when they come to Baltimore. And we're really led by the downtown business community because the business community sees the benefits of having a beautiful waterfront. And I think that's what makes the Healthy Harbor Initiative pretty unique, in that it was really business leaders from the downtown Baltimore area who came together and said, we need to do something about water quality in the Baltimore Harbor.
Yeah. And I mean, I love Baltimore a ton, but I've never really thought, oh, I want to jump in the harbor. It's almost like Baltimore can become the butt of people's jokes sometimes too. So what kind of task was this? How bad a shape was it in?
Well, we owe a lot to our chairman at the time, Michael Hankin, who is the president and CEO of Brown Advisory. They're an international investment firm that is headquartered here in Baltimore, really got its start here in Baltimore. And Mike Hankin, he's a big idea type of person. And he really set out this goal that the harbor should be safe for swimming and fishing by the year 2020. That was back in 2010. So he really said, there's no reason we can't pull this off in 10 years. And so having that big, bold vision out there really forced us all to think differently about the problem and try some unique and novel approaches.
And take me through the history here. Did people used to swim in the Baltimore Harbor like a long time ago before it became polluted?
Not in our lifetime. The harbor was very industrial for the past 150 years. That being said, we have found articles in the newspaper with pictures of people who have occasionally jumped in and swam at planned events. Like there was a polar bear plunge back in 1981. So it did happen from time to time, but it's certainly not in living memory has it been any kind of routine occurrence.
Okay, so let's talk about why it wasn't swimmable over the past several years. What were the things that were in the harbor that were problematic?
So the first thing that Waterfront Partnership did back in 2010 was we reached out to some scientists and researchers at the Center for Watershed Protection, the University of Maryland, a group called Biohabitats, and we asked them to prepare a healthy harbor plan for what it would take to make the harbor safe for swimming in just 10 years. And we really looked at three major contributors: bacteria coming from our city's old sewer infrastructure, trash and litter coming from our streets, and stormwater runoff.
So enter Mr. Trash Wheel. This thing showed up how long ago? And what was that process like? Where did he come from? What does he do?
Well, in the early days, we were talking about 2010, 2011. Like I said, we really got into trying new and novel approaches. So it was like, what do we see that's working in other cities or even in other areas around the world that we might be able to implement here in the Baltimore Harbor? And a couple of different innovative projects came out of that, including floating wetlands, which are continuing to grow and flourish in the Baltimore Harbor today. And then Mr. Trash Wheel, which was originally just a sustainably powered trash interceptor, which we really liked because it could remove trash from the water before it entered the Baltimore Harbor. But I knew that we needed to create something that was also engaging for the public, because we didn't just want to say, oh, go ahead and throw your litter in the harbor because we've got a trash interceptor. We'll take care of it, right? We want people to become part of the solution and ultimately help to reduce the need for any kind of trash interception. So I added these 5-foot-tall googly eyes to this trash interceptor, which just happened to look like the perfect combination of technology and, I don't know, silliness, and gave it a Twitter handle and put it up on social media so that people could really start to engage more with the problem of water pollution and trash in the Baltimore Harbor.
Okay, so take me through the process here. It wasn't exactly 10 years, but 14 years. And just a few months ago, there are people swimming in the harbor. So is it swimmable now?
I'd like to say that we could have done it in 2020, but we all know what happened in 2020. We got a bit delayed by a pandemic. So it wasn't until last year, myself and a couple of different advocates and Waterfront Partnership staff members conducted a test swim by jumping into the Baltimore Harbor last September. And we actually shot a documentary about it and released it in November so that we could show people that we jumped in the harbor, but also explain to them why scientifically it was a good idea for us to jump into the Baltimore Harbor. We also announced our intention to host a public event this year, which took place in June. We called it Harbor Splash, and we had 150 people sign up in 10 minutes to jump in the harbor with us. In terms of how swimmable is the Baltimore Harbor, I mean, it's way more swimmable than the average person thinks. That's for sure. It's not nearly as polluted as the comments on the internet would lead you to believe. The truth is that just like any urban waterway and much of the Chesapeake Bay, the harbor is safe for recreation so long as it hasn't rained within the past 48 hours. When it rains, that's really when pollution is carried off of our streets and our alleys into our waterways, and it takes time for that pollution to dissipate. The good news is that harmful pollution, which is mainly bacteria, dissipates relatively quickly. Within 48 hours, we see that bacteria scores go from water contact advisory to being passing and safe for recreation.
What do you recommend if someone wants to swim in the Baltimore Harbor? Can they just jump in, or what's the rules here?
Yeah, right. No one had to fathom this for so long because there was no interest in jumping in the harbor.
I've heard of people jumping in the harbor to escape the police, but I haven't heard it as a first choice.
So, right, that's a last resort. Right now, we're in an interesting period now where we're testing the water quality, and it's testing safe for recreation so long as it hasn't recently rained. But there really isn't a public swimming beach in the Baltimore Harbor, right? I mean, we're just getting to the point of like, oh, should we be talking about how we could like create a swim spot for the public? So right now, we really don't advise that people just jump off of the promenade. It's technically illegal to jump off of the promenade into the harbor. But, there's underwater obstacles. There's shipping traffic in the Baltimore Harbor. There's all sorts of reasons other than water pollution that you don't want to just jump in anywhere, anytime. So our recommendation is that people swim in the harbor during planned events like Harbor Splash this June.
Is there going to be another event?
Oh, absolutely. We're going to be doing some more swimming. Like I said, we sold out 150 tickets in 10 minutes, and then we had hundreds of people on a wait list and emailing us, begging us to let them swim in the harbor. So we know there's way more demand out there than we were able to meet with just one swim event. So we're definitely already talking about what we want to do next year.
What was it like? Did you have any holdbacks, or were you just ready to cannonball in?
Well, I was ready to go. It was so nice. Actually, I jumped in 7 times during Harbor Splash because we had groups jumping in, groups of 25 people at a time. And I went in with, I think, every group because it just was so much fun to be out there in the water. It was a hot day, but the water was cool, so it felt very refreshing. We had been testing the water quality every day leading up to the event, so we knew that the water was safe for recreation. We really need to walk the walk, or in this case, swim the swim, to help people see that we're serious. We are doing this based on science, and it's also a lot of fun and something people should really want to do. Someone told me swimming the harbor was never on their bucket list, but now it should have been because it was so much fun.
Next up, we'll hear from Dr. Eric Schott, an associate research professor for the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science at the Institute of Marine and Environmental Technology, to hear about the science behind cleaning up the harbor. Eric, let's talk about the Baltimore Harbor. You've been involved in this project to make the harbor swimmable, and you're exactly the scientist I want to talk to about exactly how this got done, because as a former Baltimore resident, I, 10 years ago, would never have gotten in the water. So can you tell me about the state of Baltimore Harbor before this project ever began and kind of what the water was like?
Sure. 10 years ago, I wouldn't have gotten in the water either. 10 years ago, the city was just starting. They were a few years into a large-scale rebuild of their sanitary sewer system. And that's largely completed now. So the big difference is that a lot of repairs have been made. That's probably the biggest part. Also in that 10 years, the city has implemented a bunch of trash reduction activities, including the Waterfront Partnership's trash wheels, Mr. Trash Wheel, Professor Trash Wheel, etc.
Professor Trash Wheel. I haven't heard that one yet.
I think there are 4 of them now. There's Wenda, the Good Wheel of the West, is next to the trash burning plant at the mouth of the Gwynns Falls. There's Professor Trash Wheel. There's another one. Anyway, there are 4 of them now. That's an interesting and innovative story of just improvements from a local man who had a background as a farmer and developed the trash wheels based on his knowledge of mechanics, of farming mechanics, and then a lot of iterations, and these things really work, and they're being used all over the world now. But to just get into the policy weeds on this, a big change in the trash situation came about because trash became a pollutant, and the EPA let the state, or maybe the local area, develop a total maximum daily load. So in the pollution world, once something's defined as a pollutant, it has to be regulated, and you have to take actions, and you have to spend money. So I'm getting into policy here, but the big movers in making the harbor such a nice place now are a lot of public support, a lot of nonprofits working all in unison to make things better. But the thing that really moves the needle is regulation. And so the city was under a consent decree from the EPA and Department of Justice to clean up their sewer system. That let the city spend the money. I guess it gave them the cover to raise sewage rates and spend the money to get the job done. And then making trash a pollutant also meant that things had to change, that again, the city and the state had to spend money to get that job done. It doesn't mean that regulation is the only thing. You need a lot of partners like Blue Water Baltimore, like the Waterfront Partnership, like the university systems, tons of neighborhood groups, too many to name. And I want to mention one more thing, which was the activism of the youth in Baltimore 5, 6, 7 years ago led to a ban on styrofoam takeout containers in the city and a ban on plastic bags in grocery stores in the city. And those made a huge difference. You could see almost overnight. And the data show it, that the data collected from the trash wheels in the Baltimore Harbor, every year or half year, they go through one of those dumpsters and count how many of everything they have in there. And the number of styrofoam containers and plastic bags dropped immediately. And it made a big difference.
How does all of that pollutants get into the harbor in the first place? Are people just leaving their trash laying all over the place and it gets washed in?
People are leaving their trash all over the place, but it's not all over the place next to water. It's in the streets. The streets are our streams. If you think about a city like Baltimore, we don't have streamways running through it. We have gutters and storm drains and underground pipes that carry water to the lowest point, which in our case is the harbor. And so if you drop, a candy wrapper in the gutter up on Cold Spring Lane, 5 miles from the harbor, it'll probably be in the harbor in 2 days because the water, rain will wash it into the storm drain system and it comes in. So what you have is this harbor is receiving the trash from an entire watershed.
Okay, so that explains the weather part of this and how Waterfront Partnership says as long as it hasn't rained in 2 days, the harbor is good. Do we ever get to that point where it doesn't matter if it rained, it's still going to be swimmable, or is that always going to be part of the problem?
The short answer is probably no, not in an urban area. But the other part of the answer is that rain washes trash in the streets into the storm drains. The real interesting thing is that how does sanitary sewage, which is in a different piping system, get into the storm drains? And that has to do with age of the systems and the leakiness of the system. So to a large extent, that's being repaired. But there are still cracks in those pipes. They run underground parallel to each other, not side by side, but close enough that you get leakage from one system to another, right? Because the sewage system is gravity fed and the stormwater system is gravity fed. And when it rains, enough water gets in the ground and in the stormwater system that it leaks back and forth between the sewage system, the two sewage systems. And it might be 0.1% of the volume, but sewage treatment plants treat over 200 million gallons a day. So if you get 99.9% of the sewage treated and properly placed, that's still hundreds of thousands of gallons of sewage that leaks into it if you're getting 0.1%, 1 part per thousand.
Okay. So, let's talk about what's in the water and how when they are measuring for bacteria levels, what type of bacteria is being measured. And, I guess I'm looking for basis of comparison, like the Idiot's Guide to Bacteria. Can we compare it to like a swimming pool or, swimming in the ocean?
All natural water bodies are full of bacteria. That's a normal, healthy state. That's right. You can think of it as the microbiome of the environment. So when we talk about bacteria in the water, what we're really talking about are what are called fecal indicator bacteria. These are bacteria that when they're present, most likely say that there's poop in the water somewhere nearby. There's some leakage. And they're general enough that it could be pretty much any vertebrate animal that is producing that, right?
So not necessarily human poop.
Not necessarily human poop. Now, in an urban area, when you have over 1 million people in the watershed, that I would say, if you look at it from an ecological perspective, we are the dominant species. Our waste is the dominant waste. So if you see the fecal indicator bacteria, it's a pretty good guess that it's human, except that we now have this sanitary system that's designed to keep it from going into the environment. So that means that other sources like dogs, geese, other birds, rats, deer, they're all producing fecal indicator bacteria. So when you get a reading for fecal indicator bacteria in the water, it's not certain that it's coming from humans. It could be coming from any number of other things. So
the Baltimore Harbor right now, is there another body of water that we can compare it to with those bacteria levels?
I think a fair comparison would be comparing our fecal indicator bacteria in the harbor to nearby swimming beaches in Chesapeake Bay that are designated swimming beaches. So think of Sandy Point State Park near the west end of the Bay Bridge. For our scientific studies, our sort of clean control site is actually very close by, called North Point State Park. It's just to the north of us on the western shore. And it always shows up clean. We haven't had any, high readings there. And people are swimming there, wading there, fishing there every day.
So have you been following the Olympics at all with the fin?
Of course. Right. I didn't read into the articles, but I saw that a Belgian swimmer couldn't swim because she had a GI, upset.
Yeah. And how about the guy that prepared himself by not washing his hands for a while? Built up his immunity. But do you happen to know those levels and how they compare to the Baltimore Harbor?
I haven't gone into the weeds on that. I saw something printed in a newspaper article. It was probably the Post or the Times that said that some swimming entities said that the levels in the Seine were twice as high as they should be at 1,000, most probable number per 100 mils. And that seems really high to me. That seems exceptionally high.
As far as you know, nobody's gotten sick after swimming in the harbor.
As far as I know, no. We the splash events in the harbor didn't have a specific please report to us about that, because that starts to raise human subject research questions. But we haven't heard anything, and believe me, we're listening for that. I know that Adam Lindquist at the Waterfront Partnership, if he'd heard something, he'd be on the phone to me to ask. Right?
Yeah.
I think they did a great job.
What about the future? Do you see the levels getting better and better and better in the future? 10 years from now, what do you see for the harbor?
I think it will get better. I think that a couple of things are happening. Well, people are turning their attention to the harbor, and that focus means that you're going to get more compliance in terms of voluntary actions like dog poop cleanup. Maybe managing urban wildlife, maybe keeping trash out of the streets, right? Those kinds of things. People think about it and care about it. So I think we're in a virtuous cycle right now where the oh my God, you jumped in the harbor is turning into, oh, maybe you can jump in the harbor. And some people start thinking it that way. It's also attractive. The harbor's very attractive right now. And I'll just add one more thing is that the National Aquarium just installed a floating wetland complex that's massive. And I had the opportunity to take a tour on it yesterday. It's a really nice experience. And it really, I think it's going to succeed in changing the visitor's perspective on this body of water. And the aquarium also did an interesting thing, was that they control the space around the aquarium. And until recently, there were benches installed next to the water. And the benches were installed so that the backs were towards the water and you faced inward towards the pier. And what the aquarium did just this summer is they removed a bunch of those benches and said, no, let's turn it around. They turned them around or they took the backs out so that you can look at the water. But before there was this enforced turning your back on the water. And I think that that's really symbolized something.
That's really interesting. You're right. I never even thought about that. I was in Baltimore last weekend, and a couple of things I noticed, and when you bring up the drainage system, I saw a lot of, the rat poison traps. I saw those shoved into storm drains on street corners. Is the rat poison going into the harbor because of that? Is that something we should be concerned with?
Well, what an I'm glad you told me about that. I'm
in Fells Point, I saw those.
I'm pretty sure that what that is that those are rat poison hotels, and we've had a long dry spell. But I think by the time you were here, we might have had one or two rainstorms. And what happens is that those are basically lightweight plastic things that mobilize with a rainstorm, and so they probably wound up in the storm drain because they got washed to the gutter, down the gutter, and now they're stuck at the storm drain.
Interesting. I was thinking that people were shoving them in there to catch the rats as they were coming out of the storm drain. But
you know what? That could be. Now I'm going to have to go over to Fells Point and look. But the answer is, yeah, if it's there, it's going to wash. Anything there is going to wash into the water.
The other thing I noticed that I hadn't seen before was people fishing in the harbor. So I know that we talk about the swimmable harbor, but also fishable harbor, right? So where is that right now? Are people fishing and selling? There are so many restaurants in Baltimore. Are people eating fish out of the harbor now in Baltimore restaurants?
People are not eating fish out of the harbor at restaurants. There is a lot of fishing. And in fact, yesterday when I toured the floating wetland, we saw a cluster of striped bass, preying on little silver sides or something, some minnows or something. It was really exciting. There's tons of fish in the harbor. They're not here by accident. They're definitely here because it's a good place to be. And there are anglers who like to fish for them. People may or may not be aware that there are restrictions on how many fish you should eat from an urban estuary like this because of PCB and mercury contamination in the fish flesh. I do hear anecdotally from other anglers or commercial fishermen that there are people that are fishing in, say, the back river area for carp or catfish, and that those are making their way to markets. But those are people with commercial licenses using a seine, right? It's not just anglers.
Gotcha. Would you eat fish out of the harbor right now?
Sort of. 2 weeks ago, I was in the Middle Branch and at a crab feast for crabs that were caught in the Patapsco River Basin. Nice big blue crabs, very tasty. I wouldn't eat a lot of them. There are contaminants in the water. I think I'm old and my neurological system isn't developing anymore, so I don't think I'm that worried about it. But
Baby should avoid it.
I trust the state's guidance on how many meals of a fish you can eat from the harbor.
Okay, so we should just educate ourselves on how much we should be eating.
Yeah, and I think it's a good idea to keep reminding people of that there's no such thing as no risk, but you really want to minimize your risk. For children and pregnant women, you just want to not eat fish from an urban estuary at all.
Is there anything else you want to share about this project or Baltimore in general or your work?
I'm excited about the Middle Branch Restoration Project in Baltimore. It's an area that is surrounded by low-income communities and post-industrial areas that really has the potential to become a recreational focus. A lot of our attention is on the Inner Harbor, where the National Aquarium is, where my science research center is. It's the touristic center and kind of the financial area. But let's not forget that the swimmable, fishable harbor is really more meaningful to Baltimore residents who live in underserved areas where they don't have the option for recreation. Like they can't fly to Aruba, or they don't have time to go to a rec center. If they had clean water right there, just imagine how great that would make it.
I want to finish today with the story of marathon swimmer Katie Pumphrey. On June 25th, 2 days after the Harbor Splash event, Katie became the first person to swim the 24 miles from the Chesapeake Bay Bridge to Baltimore's Inner Harbor.
My Bay to Baltimore swim took me 13 hours, 54 minutes.
After months of planning, she set a date.
Originally, we planned the swim to be in early May.
With the collapse of the Key Bridge, plans changed and the swim got pushed to June.
So the water in late June warms up fast. So it was in the 80s, up to 82.3 at one point. Air temperature was in the 90s. So it was the hottest swim I've ever done by far, by 20 degrees.
Despite less than ideal conditions, she persisted.
It was amazing. It was a really tough swim, definitely one of the toughest swims I've ever done.
She did it. She arrived at the Inner Harbor to a crowd of screaming fans.
Baltimore shows up for each other, and they really did. So there was a huge crowd at the finish. Mr. Trash Wheel was there.
Fox Baltimore reporter Megan Gilland followed Katie's swim from start to finish, along with photojournalist Benjamin Ott. Take a listen.
It's 3 a.m.
Beautiful night tonight.
And on the moonlit shores of Sandy Point State Park.
Not too cold, not too windy.
Desmond Jenkins
doing what I love to do.
casts into the darkness.
You want I could clean them off for a better shot.
Catching a glimpse
Caught in bigger ones, like from the floor all the way up to like my
of
waist.
something he has never seen in these waters.
If I seen someone swimming out here, I'd probably think they were crazy. So she's gonna leave out of here and swim.
But it's not just any swim.
Is she out there? She should do a great job. I'm rooting for her.
This swim is making waves.
Definitely warm, so she should do really good.
Under the morning rush of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge,
Must be moving really fast to keep up with them.
ultra-marathon open water swimmer Katie Pumphrey is splashing into history.
And I wouldn't think anybody could do that. That's really far.
As a brighter spotlight shines down on her journey,
You have to be strong to do that. I mean, if I swim out to the crab pots and back, that's, I'm short of breath.
Ray Welsel's house in Pasadena
It's a long swim.
marks the 3-hour mark.
And then we have the cruise ships that come through here. Never a swimmer. You don't see that very often.
Averaging roughly 2 miles per hour.
That's a long trip.
Pumphrey still has a long way to go.
24 miles is definitely a long trip. Some people don't drive that far in a day.
She's now 6 hours in
The sun's out, it's a beautiful day, so I just came out to take a gander.
and drawing crowds.
It's Sandy Point. That's a long way to swim. It's 24 miles. They said something like take her 12 hours to do it.
And just then,
I don't know how warm it is.
Because there's the island, the boat, the head, then the boat, right?
Carlos Foster spots Pumphrey in the water near Fort Armistead.
Is that the little dot, her head?
Yep, that's her.
Swimming over and over and over.
With her team in tow, only taking breaks to eat and drink every 30 minutes and never touching anyone or anything to keep the swim official.
Then she would just go around the bend, and around that bend should take her around to where the harbor is.
9 hours in, and Christopher Romey is waiting.
The wind's blowing, but it's not no choppy, you know what I mean?
And waiting.
Would you like to use these binoculars?
And waiting.
Start 3 o'clock this morning. What time is it now? Been out there almost 10 hours.
And then suddenly,
yeah, I can see her head and her arms.
Passing under the remnants of the Francis Scott Key Bridge.
It's amazing how fast they got everything cleaned up.
Here and in the harbor where Pumphrey is now heading.
It's all to promote everything, Baltimore City, about the harbor and everything. They said the water's cleaner now where you can swim in.
Pumphrey now making her final kick into it.
The quintessential Baltimore thing.
Surrounded by...
Yeah, that is the pirate ship.
Friendly fire.
So no, they will not steal or rob or plunder her crew.
Rob Bennett, along with members of the Canton Kayak Club.
Great to see all these boats out.
Paddling out to witness history.
I think they're just helping feed her energy.
But stroke...
Yeah! 24 miles she's swimming straight since 3:20 a.m. this morning.
By stroke. By stroke.
As she said, a love letter to Baltimore.
By stroke.
Moved me to tears that she was doing that.
She's doing it. Placing her hand on land for the first time in 14 hours. Katie Pumphrey is home. Cheers to that. In Baltimore, I'm Megan Gillen.
Off the Radar is a production of the National Weather Desk. Make sure you're following the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. New episodes publish every Tuesday. If you loved this episode, please share it with a friend. You can also now listen to the show on YouTube. Just search the National Weather Desk and you'll find it under the podcast tab. Thank you to all that contributed to today's podcast, Adam Lindquist and the team from Waterfront Partnership in Baltimore, Dr. Eric Schott from the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science. Also thanks to Megan Gillen, Benjamin Ott, and Amy Aronson from WBFF in Baltimore for their coverage of Katie Pumphrey. And of course to the team from the National Weather Desk, Ryan Berlin for joining me on this episode, and Jay Mishkin for his ongoing support. For the National Weather Desk, I'm meteorologist Emily Gracie. Make it a great day.